Not a good time for internet to go out, Facebook. There we go. Close all this junk. Now you can hear me. Hope so, right? Yeah, maybe, perhaps, somewhat ish. Um, Waiting for this to go. If you can see me, say cheese. If you can hear me, say cheese. I'm not even in the group yet, sorry. I'm trying to think in there. Come on. There I am. Morning. Hey, Joan. I see you. You see me. That's good. Lynn's here. Cheese, cheese. Yep. All right. We got people in. Thanks for being in. Thank you for being you. Got some good stuff today, I think. I never know until it happens. Lynn's well, just teacher's pet over there. I said say cheese, and she just dropped an emoji, a cheese emoji. I didn't know we had such a thing, like 3D too. It's pretty fancy. Oh, one person left. That's all right. They already knew it wasn't going to be good. They've decided. Go tell your friends, everyone. I know a couple people are going to be gone. We got one person doesn't have internet. I've been there. Might be there today. I can see everything. Looks like you can hear me okay. Am I loud enough? I got a new little microphone. It's really cute. So this was the old one I was using, the Yeti Blue Yeti, full size. And these are the little wristbands that my buddy Dave Behrens gave me. Today pain, tomorrow gain, dream it, believe it, achieve it. So I just put those on there. But this was the guy I was using. It's pretty fancy, and it stopped working well. It works, but like the USB port, was getting a little finicky. So check this out. I got this cute little one. Oh my goodness, it's so small and cute. This is actually the same microphone technology, so it's blue, and it's the Yeti Nano. So it's the same microphone. The guts inside are the same. It has two patterns instead of four. So before it was like omnidirectional, bidirectional, unidirectional. Just kind of a supercardioid kind of build. I don't know if anybody knows anything about microphones, but it doesn't matter. This one only has two, so it's got front and then like surround sound kind of, so I can do an audio thing with multiple people in a room, but I don't ever invite anybody into my bunker because it's mine. Anyway, point is, got a new microphone, so just wanted to test it out, make sure you guys can hear me okay. Looks like Joan says I sound great, nice and clear. Yeah, Lynn, I had the Blue Snowball. It's a great mic. It's a very good mic. I did a couple audiobooks back in the day, my own audiobooks I recorded using that Snowball. Blue is a fantastic company. It used to be that USB was not really good enough, and it wasn't because it was USB. It was just that these microphone manufacturers were sort of treating USB like it was like an amateur, like a consumer grade microphone kind of thing, right? So you'd have I have an audio interface over here. I can plug a microphone into it, have the boom and all that. It's like this whole fancy thing. And then Blue, and I'm sure they're not the first ones, but companies started doing these USB mics that were every bit as good as most other microphones. I'm gonna have to make that go away. I don't know if you can hear that. Because people were doing like podcasting and all the other junk that we have now, and it was more popular to just have something you can just plug into your computer, kind of plug and play. So I'm going off on a tangent here. I know that, but you're all here listening to me, and I don't really start kicking things off until about 7-8 minutes into it. So stay tuned. Anyway, yeah. So Blue is I'm a big fan of that company. They do some good stuff. I've used their condenser mics, the Blue Spark. I think it's called the Spark. Maybe no, the Blue Lightning. I don't know. There's some fancier one, and they're all good. They're all good. The Snowball's great. It's a little bit. It kind of rolls off the highs and the lows a little bit, so it's a little bit more of a compressed sort of sound. Not a bad thing. It's just it's a cheaper microphone. That is, I think, their entry level right? The snowball, but it's cute. It's like a little ball, and it's just a little like wiggly stand. I had one of those for years, and I recently or not recently, I upgraded about 5 6 years ago to this Yeti that I've got, and it's great. It's just such a, I mean, it's like a blunt object. Like I can use it as a weapon if I had to. Thankfully, I haven't had to yet, but it's cool. It's just the USB plug in the bottom. It's very wiggly, and I'm like, well, that was one upside to having audio interface with XLR cables and all that. And like you plug it in and it clicks and it's in there. You're not gonna pull it out. With USB, it's like if I move the wrong way, it'll fall out of the bottom of the damn thing and it'll start over. Anywho, welcome in. Thanks for being here. Got another eyeball showing up. I appreciate you. If you are new, I can't imagine you are because nobody ever new shows up to these things. It's all the OG folks like Lynn and Tracy's here. Welcome, Tracy. I know Tracy and Joan. Lynn, I don't know if you're in our Author Ascend Pro. You need to be in there. It's free this month. I know I keep harping on that every week, but there's no reason not to be. Even if it's a time thing, they're all recorded. I've got the one we did last week is up in that folder. So yeah, I mean, jump in there. We talked about Facebook ads 2 months ago, and we skipped November because it was travel for me and Thanksgiving and all that. And then this month we're talking just marketing in general and kind of building that mindset. It's helpful for people. Randall should be in there too. I don't know what you're doing, bud. I mean, I know you got a business to run, but how hard can that be? Jump in there, get in that Author Ascend program. It is free, totally free, 100% free. Yeah, you can put a credit card in case you want to keep going. That's how I get you. Right? No, but during December it's totally free, and jump in there, see what you think. If you can't make the live calls, it doesn't matter. Send me an email and I'll answer the question or whatever thing you have during the next call. All of them are pre-recorded, or all of them are recorded, and then you can listen to the previous ones. We're talking about marketing this month and building that mindset, and I'm giving you. So I actually yesterday just finished the homework assignment. It's a full workbook going through that marketing mindset, and you go through and you answer questions, and it helps you figure out your own audience and building a persona if you want to go that route like we talked about. I believe it's helpful stuff. It's the kind of thing I would have wanted when I got started, and as I not just as a newbie, like as I went on and became an expert in self-publishing. It's the kind of thing that would have really helped me every year go through this process of what's my marketing plan, what do I need to do different, what do I need to keep the same, what do I need to spend more money on, less money on, whatever. And that's just 1 month. That's just what we did this month. So next month, January, it'll be something different. Got some ideas. So anyway, point is jump in there, go over to BookCareerInAYear.com. I think actually I need to set up that link. It's learn.bookcareerinayear.com. Click around, you'll probably end up there. And then it says join the club, and you can join the Author Ascend program. It's $29 a month. It's not that expensive. Because I want to try to get it into as many people's hands as possible. But even during December this year, I'm doing it for free. Cool. Welcome in, everyone. Yeah, thanks for being here. If you're watching me over on the Twitter or the X or whatever we call it, come on over to the Facebook group. I know if you're on X or Twitter, it's probably because you don't like Facebook. I get it. But Facebook does have this group option, which makes it easier for us to do the kind of back and forth engagement type stuff. It ain't perfect, but nothing is. So we're doing Facebook. If you're on YouTube, thanks. I always say this every week that I'm going to get to the comments and answer your comment, and I always don't do that. So I will force myself to answer your comments and questions over on YouTube if you're there. But please, 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 if you have Facebook, jump on over, join the group, get in there. That's where we live and hang out and operate pretty much all the time. Yeah, big changes coming, I think. Good things. I'm working on some stuff that I'm pretty excited to talk about, but can't yet, and waiting on some things that I'm not sure about. That'll be really exciting either way. Paul asked if there's a coupon code for the free month. Yeah, dude, thank you. That's on me. Sorry. Yes, use the code Black Friday Author, all one word. I think that's the one. Use that. That should get you in there. It should be totally free. Let me know if it's not, but that should be the code. Black Friday Author, all one word, smashed together. I don't think it's case sensitive, but try it all caps if it is. Thanks, Paul. Jump in there. Like I said, I'm trying to do the hard sell because I'm not trying to make a bunch of money. It's $29 a month normally, so really not going to make me rich, folks. It's really because I was trying to imagine what I would have wanted and still want, every step of my career is somebody that not just, I'm not trying to position myself as some expert or guru. And you'll hear, we talk about research, these are just my ideas. This isn't something that I've done a bunch of academic research and this is how you should do research. Author Ascend is essentially somebody who's gone through it before me, who's experienced a lot of this stuff before and can show you the ropes. Hey, this is going to work. This is not going to work. Try it this way. Try it this way. But unlike a course, which is kind of one to many or one to one, or even coaching, which is one to one or one to a group, this is a lot more back and forth because it's live. And if you can't make the live calls, we're going to change them every month. There'll be different days, that kind of thing. So I'm trying to get everybody an opportunity to see it live, to be there live, because I think it's important for what everyone needs. So that's the pitch. Yeah, go check that out. Black Friday Author, I believe, is the code, and you should be able to get in there. Okay. Moving right along. Let's talk about research, folks. Research is, I'm surprised I've never talked about it before because it really is one of my favorite subjects when it comes to writing books, writing fiction, writing anything really, because even, and perhaps especially nonfiction, research is important. And, when I say research, what I'm talking about is everything that's going to go into the book, that we need to know before we write the book or while we write the book. So it can be anything from looking up facts and figures to reading other fiction books about, something that has a similar subject, or even just, hey, my characters suck. I need to figure out how this guy does characters. I'm doing that right now. I'm reading Jeremy Robinson's entire Infinite Timeline series because it's so good. All of it's great. The plot is awesome. Everything's good. Shameless sales pitch for Jeremy over there. He's not me, so I don't know why I said shameless, but go read Jeremy Robinson if you want to learn how, to really build characters really well is my point. That's all research for me, right? And watching Netflix shows can be research. But the point is, we as authors typically fall into the category of really loving research, really wanting to do research. And like all authors, everyone's kind of got a different way to do it. But generally, as I've talked to authors over the years and as I've experienced my own kind of desires about research going into a new book, I've come to this realization that we as a species, as authors, we typically lean on the side of we research too much rather than we don't do enough research. Not always, and not every single time, and not every book we do may be a little different. But I wanted to talk about research because there are three major problems, or I say main problems, that kind of everything sort of falls into. The categories of questions I get, or the types of challenges and struggles that authors face, especially newer authors, if you're working on the first, second, third book that you've ever written. How do you do research and do it well so that your readers know what you're talking about, but it's also not info dump all over the place? And so there's this really delicate balance, I think. But let me give you those three problems before we really jump into stuff, because these are the three big issues that I see over and over again in my own writing, and also in writing of stuff I've heard other people talk about. Sorry, I'm getting messages here. Okay, so the first problem, and I mentioned this already, is that we love the research, and it's not a problem until it becomes a problem, right? Because we get stuck in the research, or we waste time researching, right? There's that delicate balance again of like, well, we need to do research, and guess what? It turns out I love to do research, so let me dive in, and I'm gonna go to Barnes & Noble for the day and read all the stuff on Barnes & Noble. I'm gonna bring it over to the coffee shop because the stupid company doesn't have chairs in their store, and I have to go to a whole other thing. But the point is, I love research. I'm gonna get that stack of books. I'm gonna go over and just read all day. And I'm not gonna actually write. I'm not gonna get any words written. I'm just gonna research. And maybe for a day, that's fine. And then we buy one of those books, right? Or two of those books. We bring them home with us, and we continue that. We read at night, and we read in the morning, and then we read when we're supposed to be writing. And pretty soon, we realize all we've been doing is research, right? So at what point have we done too much research? Do we know too much about this subject, whatever it may be, that we want to put into our book to make it seem more realistic? That's problem number one. We love the research so much, we get stuck in it, and we end up doing too much of it, and we don't know when to stop or how to stop. But there's one more thing I need to know about this. There's one more date I need to learn. There's one more story that I want to hear. Second problem is it's the opposite. We have two, actually, so let me do another one first. I'll do that one last. Another problem is we have too much research because we've spent so much time researching that now we don't know how to get through it. We don't know how to parse it. We don't have access to it when we need it, which is when we're writing that book, right? There's all this research, but it's unorganized. That's really the fix for the problem, is how to organize our research. But that's the second problem. It's that, a lot of authors have both problems that I just mentioned, or one or the other, but it's often because we love the research, we want to do it, we want to spend all this time reading and researching and hearing stories and learning about these subjects we write about. That's sort of the whole point of writing. But then we end up either with spending too much time in research, we get bogged down, we haven't written anything, or we have so much research that there's no possible way we can even get through it all. And this happens because we're reading so much and we're researching so much that we might just highlight a section and write in the margin or something or one or the other, and then we forget about it. So that when we need that quote or that story or that snippet of factual data that we highlighted or wrote a note about in the margin, we don't know how to, we don't have the recall. We can't figure out where we found that. Or what happens to me all the time is I think to myself, well, I know there's something about this that I highlighted, but gosh, I can't remember what that quote was, and I can't even paraphrase. I don't even really know what book it was in, right? Another problem is we've been browsing the web and surfing the web. We open 15 million tabs, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I got to get writing, so I'm just going to save all these tabs into a bookmark folder, and I'll go through it later. And then what happens? Well, we don't really know what's in that folder. We know that it's a dump of Portuguese fort building from the 1700s that we did research for. We don't know what specifically is in there, and so we don't have the way to parse the information. That's the second big problem. The third one is the opposite of the first and kind of the second problem. Instead, we have too little research. And like I said, this isn't as common for most authors. We don't have a problem doing more research than too. We usually have the problem doing too much rather than too little. But that can be a problem, and it is the third biggest problem that I've heard about. It's that we just don't have we don't have enough research, and so our books sort of feel thin. They feel thinner than the paper they're written on, right? They're just sort of like, characters running around this potentially great plot, but there's no sustenance to kind of hold them there. It doesn't feel realistic. I imagine, I'm not a fantasy author, but I imagine this would be an issue with writing fantasy because we don't have a world to research. We're inventing that world in a lot of sense, right? What the trees are blue instead of green, whatever. Now, that's usually not an issue with the fantasy authors I've spoken to because world building is part of why they love writing fantasy. So it ends up kind of solving itself. But the point is, we have too little research. In my world, in thrillers, modern day action and adventure novels, the issue is, weaponry, guns, ammunition. Like, that is always an area where I'm like, well, okay, it's a gun, folks. You know what that looks like. It goes bang, bang, and shoots people. Picture it yourself. But it's so easy to just go and do a little bit of research on what gun they're carrying because they're, from this country or whatever, and then give that to them. And it just makes it seem more real for the military folks or the gun folks out there. The people who understand that and speak that language will be grounded in this world I'm building for them. So a lot of times my research will be thin because I don't know what to do, or I just didn't think that I needed to research that. So those are the three problems. We've got too much research. We don't know how to parse or access the research that we've had. And three is we just have too little research. So I'm going to talk about those three things. I'm going to give you some tricks and some fixes that I've found over the years. And then at the end, I want to talk about some resources, some actual tools that you can use to help you along your research journey. Now, all of this to say, you all probably have your own stuff that you use. And I'm excited to hear what that is. So as we go, you can drop a comment, you can drop a question. I'll try to get it in kind of as we go. Certainly at the end, you can, I'll ask you to kind of copy, paste, re-up that comment because I can only see the previous 4. But if you've got a tool that you love to use, drop it in there. Either link to it or just give us the title of it and tell us how it works, how you use it. This should be a, kind of a communal effort here. I don't want to just come at you with, only the stuff that Nick knows about. So jumping into these fixes, I want to take them backwards. I want to take them, at least with the last one first, which is too little research, because this is both the most uncommon problem that I've heard of the most common problems, if that makes sense, that authors face. But it's also one that I think there's some really there's a lot to talk about in it, right? So we'll talk about that one first. I noticed this about my books. Somewhere along the route, the journey, I was getting anxiety and I was having panic attacks and everything. And I felt like it was financially related. I needed to just write more books, and that meant less research. Just get the damn thing out, and then keep going, right? And so I was like, I want to write a book every single month, and I was just going super fast. And this is before I was dictating, before I had built a dictating practice, and so I was just using my little fingies, trying to burn through 10,000 words a day, and I was getting burned out, obviously. But I also noticed about a year later, I went back and I would read some of these, and they're in the Harvey Bennett series right in the middle. I won't tell you which ones. You can probably figure it out by the reviews. But I noticed that these were pretty thin. They just didn't feel real. They didn't feel like there was enough substance there. I had the characters, and they weren't brand new. Most of them, they were Harvey Bennett and at his friends, and I'd already developed them throughout the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 books, and so when I got into rereading this stuff, I realized, man, this stuff is thin. I'm missing something here. And what I believe is that the research was thin. I didn't do enough research. I didn't actually put any of the research that I had done over the past, lifetime of studying history into these books. And so they felt thin. They just sort of felt manufactured in a bad way. So I developed or found 2 tricks that I think are helpful if you are running into your research being thin. That you just don't really, you can't quite put your finger on it maybe, you don't know what it is. Perhaps it is that your research is thin, it's not coming through enough. This is a dangerous problem to find yourself in, because the inclination we have as authors is to go info dump, right? It's to go literally put that research in, right? It's to say, okay, well, I don't have enough research. This whole thing feels thin. It's not really, it's kind of tacked onto a scaffolding, but there's no drywall. There's no, whatever. I'm sorry for my building analogy here. There's no paint on the walls, like whatever. It just feels thin. It feels like it's lacking. Our first inclination usually is to go say, all right, copy paste Wikipedia, put it into ChatGPT, paraphrase the damn thing, and then drop it in, right? And that's just like, some character that shows up and goes, hey, by the way, this was built in 1759, and all of a sudden you info dump that. And then if you're like me and you're really lazy, you do it in dialogue so that it doesn't feel like info dumping. It's not showing, it's telling. Or it's showing, not telling, because dialogue usually is show instead of tell, but that's not always true when you info dump. So the point is, don't do that. Here's a trick. Trick number 1 is aim to know the other 90%. Okay, aim to know the other 90%. And what that means is, let's assume, and I didn't come up with this number, but let's assume, and the number works, that 10% of the research that you've done should end up in the book. 10%. Okay, so let's say you've done some active research, and by definition, what I mean is research that you've done exclusively and specifically for this current work in progress. So I don't mean, the body of knowledge you have on the Portuguese, conquistadors that you've learned in like history class in like 3rd grade or whatever, 6th grade. That's helpful, and that certainly can give you some. I'm talking about research that you've done specifically for this book. So if you're putting something about Portuguese conquistadors or settlers or whatever in your book, this is research that you've done since you started doing this project, just on that. So that's what I'm talking about. So let's say you read 2 books. Well, that's however many pages of content, of knowledge, and you're aiming for 10% of that. And I don't mean, that was 600 pages, so now 60 pages have to be, all just Portuguese conquistadors in my book. I'm not saying that. I'm saying 10% of kind of the body of factual knowledge that you have now should end up in the book. Don't harp on me for the percentage. I think that's arbitrary. But let's just say it's 10%. You want that to end up in the book. Well, then that means you need to know the other 90%. And usually if our books are thin in the research department, it's because we don't have that 90%. We don't have the rest. And so we only have 1% in our book instead of that 10% that we're shooting for. I hope this is making sense, but let's go with it, because I think it'll make more sense a little bit more. This particular thing I have found is really important in fantasy, sci-fi, space opera, this kind of stuff that's not real, in terms of we don't have a real, Earth or an Earth that we know, because we think, okay, well, we're just going to make up the world, so I can write whatever I want. And this is why I don't write fantasy, because it's so hard for me to do that. I can't imagine a world that doesn't exist. The thing is, the person reading the book is a human, and humans are often similar to us because we, as authors, believe it or not, are also human. And so the reader should be grounded in some sort of reality. And if it's fantasy, there's not a lot of reality to pull from because you're making it up, right? There's trolls that inhabit the world instead of humans, whatever. But these people that read the book are human, and they need to be grounded in human-like emotion, reason, logic, whatever, so that when you build an ancient fort, for example, something that let's even if it's inhabited by trolls, and we're going to go with the fort analogy for the rest of this, just because I think it makes the most sense. So when you build something in your fantasy novel that is inhabited by this whole species of things that aren't even human, you're going to make changes like, well, the walls were shorter because the trolls were shorter or whatever, or bigger because they're bigger. I don't care. But there should be some research you've done. You should know what that fort looks like. Well, why is the fort structured the way it is? You've done research because you want to make that seem realistic to the reader, even though you're inhabiting the place with trolls. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but the thing is, you got to understand the purpose of what you're putting into the book, and you need research to do that. So it was built by someone or something for some reason. And even though you don't have this world to research because you're making it up as you go along, you can still research how forts are built and why, and who are they trying to protect, who are they trying to keep out. All this stuff can be research that you've invented, or in another sense done, before you've written that fantasy book. So obviously some challenges there because you're making things up as you go along, but the key is that you've done that other 90% of the research. So the reader that's reading that fantasy book doesn't need to know who built the fort, but there could be little snippets of, oh yeah, this was built by an ancient race of trolls to keep out the big, mysterious, scary thing. Cool. That's all I need to know as a reader. I don't really care. It's about the trolls, right? It's not about the history, but the fact that there was the history is going to make that story seem more realistic. I hope that is making sense. Let's go back to the real world because that's what I write and that's what I understand, and it makes this analogy make a little bit more sense. But I know that in the current work in progress I've got a Portuguese fort built on the coast of Brazil. And it was built for very specific reasons to keep out, native population, protect the people inside the fort who are Catholic, trying to convert the population. All this stuff is so true, and it's factual, and it's something you can research, but it's not key to my story. It's part of the history of that fort, but I just need to have people in a Portuguese fort. That's it. I got characters doing different things, but knowing that 90% is going to help make the book seem less thin in the research department. That 10% that ends up in there that kind of bleeds through into the pages and seeps into the dialogue by the tour guide, for example, whoever the character is going to make everything seem more realistic. And if I do my job right, I'm going to entice the reader to go do their own research. Oh, is that fort real? That sounds really cool. Wow, there was a massacre there? That seems really cool. My book isn't about that, so I'm not going to put detail about that in there, but I might make it a sentence in passing. Oh yeah, there was a massacre here because the natives rose up against the conquistadors and killed them all. So a lot of this stuff when you do the research ends up being kind of your own secret, but knowing that secret, you're not putting it in the book, but you know it, it's sort of like changes the way you write, and that becomes your biggest asset. It's going to make the pages really come to life. And a lot of this stuff, it sounds a little woo-woo because I'm trying to give you actual, tangible, practical things to do. But at the same time, research isn't about that. Research is about this kind of this overall strategy, this body of knowledge that you have as an expert in your story. Even if you don't think you're doing enough of it, it's going to end up bleeding through because you've done that work. So the point is to find that extra 90%, to go learn the extra 90%. And then as you write, you end up putting 10% in there that it's enough to make your story seem realistic. Okay, trick number 2 for when your book is thin, when the research is thin, force yourself to add a setup character. Now, this sounds really ham-fisted, and if you don't do it well, it can certainly be. But it does absolutely work. There's so many books, and Jeremy Robinson, the example I gave before, does this really, really well. He does this brilliantly. Like, there's a new character that will show up, usually toward the beginning, because you don't want to be introducing brand new characters on the last page necessarily. But toward the beginning of the book, we need to get information. We need to figure out what we're doing, why we're here, where we are, what's going on. And he can introduce a character and it seems so natural. Somebody walks onto the stage and says, blah, 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 this is a Portuguese fort, and then leaves or sticks around or whatever. But there's a new character that's introduced, and you can give that character some sound bites to tell your other characters, to let them, to clue them in on what's going on. All of this clues in the reader on what's going on. Now, again, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, and unfortunately, they're kind of, it's like a Venn diagram of how to, there's no very clear delineation between right and wrong. It's a lot of intuition and practice and reading other people who do it well. But this is absolutely a trick that I've used in some of those books to go back and say, this book is a little thin. I'm as lazy as I can be. I don't want to, change a bunch of the content, but can I add a character here? So let's take my book, The Paradise Key, which I believe suffered from thinness in the research department. It's this research aquarium type theme park off the coast of the Bahamas or Bermuda, one of those. And so it's this really pretty location, but it's all like, there's like scary animals there, and that ends up being kind of the one of the big plot drivers. And so my characters show up there, and they just sort of start walking around and doing stuff. Now, I was just reading back over this, and I thought, what would really be helpful here, I did all this research, but the book still feels thin. Maybe I don't know the 90%, maybe I'm like at 75%. I need to do more research, but I now need to add some of that 10% into the book. And what great way to do that is when those characters show up, rather than having them immediately interact with the antagonist, which is what the book currently is or does, have them interact with some sort of, welcoming party or a tour guide or some, henchman of the antagonist, of the villain that says, hey, my job here is to make you guys feel comfortable, while you're here, wink, 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 or whatever. But there can be information that I give the reader through giving it to the other characters in that kind of environment. And it doesn't take very much. I can put in a sentence or 3 sentences that give a little bit of backstory that say, hey, this is kind of a new thing that we're trying, but it's a pretty popular style of doing a theme park. Rather than all fun, it's, there's a lot of research here too, so you can kind of do both. And then the reader might go, well, that's kind of cool, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I guess you could have an adventure theme park that's not just about entertainment, it's also, you've got people doing research there, like a SeaWorld type thing. Anyway, the point is, and maybe that's not the best example, but the point is you can force a character into the story. And when I say force, try not to make it seem forced, but you're literally putting a character in there that just exists to live in that world and know that world and live and breathe in that world you've created, to give information to the reader through giving it to other characters. And I call that a setup character. Okay, so that's problem number 1, too little research. Let me look at, you guys still seeing me and hearing me? My live video ended, so I don't know why. Drop a comment, let me know you're still with me, but if not, I'm going to keep rolling because I am recording as far as I know. Yep, I am, and we are good to go. So too much is the other problem. You've got too much research. This was the first problem I mentioned. This is the most common problem that I find in my own writing. When I'm not anxious and having panic attacks, I usually will want to do too much research because research is super fun. We all love to read. We all love to explore and discover and learn, blah, blah, blah. So this is the most common problem. And the main fix for this, in my opinion, is to go through and figure out what's the crucial information that your characters need. In other words, that setup character that you may have added is going to tell your reader something by way of telling your characters something. And you, as the author, as the expert in this world you're building, need to be really, really clear about what information is crucial to those characters knowing and that the reader eventually knowing. And then not necessarily getting rid of everything else, but figuring out what you need to actually put in the book and what you kind of can imply and what you can leave out completely. Again, 90%, the 10% that ends up in the book is what you have to figure out how to put in or get rid of if there's more than that. Again, those numbers are arbitrary, but you need to know a lot more, than what your reader ends up knowing. So, for example, in this book that I'm currently working on, the Portuguese fort, is it important that it's from the 1700s? Is it important that it was inhabited by Catholic monks and these soldiers and sailors that built it? Is it important that they had slaves help build it? Or is it just crucial that it's a Portuguese fort because they find an inscription on one of the walls in like the dungeon, for example, that's written in kind of a Middle Portuguese language. What's important? Like, what do we need to know here? And you can probably tell by my implication here. You can infer that I don't need any of that other stuff. I just need people to know that it's a Portuguese fort. Okay, it's in Brazil. We can kind of make assumptions as a smart, intelligent reader, and don't dumb down your book. Assume your reader is more intelligent than you. That's something I had to learn the hard way early on. Do not assume that they're dumber than you, or you're going to make big mistakes adding too much info dumps and things in there. Assume they're smart enough to go do their own research, or assume that they already know what you're trying to imply. Okay, I need them to know that it's Portuguese. They can imply, or they can infer from that, it's in Brazil, and so it was probably built in the 1700s. Or I can easily say that this is, a fort that's a few hundred years old. They can do the math. But they can also go research. Okay, well, all the Portuguese forts that were built that we know about, and this is a real one. This is one they can go research. Were built this time period from this year to this year, and it was built by these people trying to do this. And there were some uprisings, and the locals kind of fought with them. And to this day, there's probably some unrest between the Catholics and religious people and some people who are native or tribal. The point is, I don't need to put all that in there. I just need to know that, because that's going to help make my story feel real in my head. And when I write it, it's going to come out that way. But I'm not going to actually write all of that stuff. So, for example, let me give you what I wrote before we did this as my notes, and it'll make more sense, right? So instead of saying something like this, I have a setup character come in, and I do have that. It's a tour guide. She's this blocky looking short woman who's really intelligent and knowledgeable about this particular fort, and she's a fun little character. And I'm literally having her walk around showing my main characters this fort that there's going to be a scene in. There's going to be a set piece later on. So I could have her say something like this. This fort was built on the coast of Brazil by early Portuguese conquistadors searching for gold and trying to convert locals to Catholicism. It was constructed in 1746. That's not the real date. Don't worry about it. And it was taken over by local tribes who killed the soldiers. But then the soldiers came back with a vengeance. And in 1785, they retook the fort, set fire to the surrounding town. And then to this day, that's why there's unrest between Catholics and those who have native ancestry. There's a huge chunk of factual data. And this isn't factual because I just made it up. But it could easily be. I could just copy paste a Wikipedia article, paraphrase it, rewrite it, whatever, and pop it in, and we're good to go. But we're not good to go because that sucks. And no one's going to want to read all that because most of it isn't crucial to my story. So the discernment as the writer, as the author who loves to do research and will lean on the side of doing more research than too little research, is always going to want to go through that paragraph and go, what's actually crucial to the story, and what's something I can leave out completely, and what's something that I may need to imply because I want the reader to kind of, come with me on this journey. And that's really that's the point, is trying to get, obviously there's the obvious stuff. I'm telling the story, the reader's reading the story, but then there's this interplay between yourself and the reader, the author and the reader, where if you do your job really well, you're giving the reader the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, you're not assuming that they're dumb. You're assuming that they're smarter than you and that they know this stuff. And if you've read a book that does this really well, you love that as a reader. You love going back and being like, wow, Dan Brown just briefly mentioned the golden ratio, or phi, the Greek number phi is what it represents, 1.618 to 1. This ratio. And what it means in history. And it's like a Professor Langdon, I think, is doing like a talk, and he just kind of references it. The book doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just something cool that he threw in there. And he assumed that I was smart enough to be intrigued by it. And then I literally went and bought like 3 books on the golden ratio to go research more of that. That's what you're after when you do this really well. That's what you want, is to tell the reader, hey, this is important. Here's one sentence that's important. And then all of the other stuff that's implied is just really cool. You can go research it on your own time, but we don't have time because we got a story to tell, right? So that's what you're trying to do. So I could take that whole paragraph and I could figure out what's important. Okay, well, it's history. It needs to be a real fort, or let's say it is a real fort. Then they can go research that. So we don't need to give them all the information now because it's real. They can go look it up. Okay, cool. They're not stupid. They can go research more, and your job is to get them excited about that. So you might do that by having the tour guide say something like this. The natives here, the people from this area, have a really strong distrust for anyone Catholic, or really anyone presenting as like religious. It all started because of this fort. Dun, dun, dun. Now your characters are like, oh, that's cool. Great. And, it's not crucial to the plot. What happens later is, modern day bad guys trying to kill modern day good guys. And that's the plot. But I've given this little snippet of history that the reader could be like, well, this is actually really cool. I'm going to mark this and make a note of it. And I'm going to go research this fort and why these people don't trust each other now. That's all you got to do, guys. And I know I kind of made it overcomplicated, but I'm trying to make you realize, like, kind of actively think about what do you actually need for the plot. Tell the reader that. Don't hide that. But what do you not need for the plot? Don't tell that at all. Just know that. Do the research on your own and figure that out. But then don't shy away from implying or having them and letting them infer through something you told them that there could be more information, more cool stuff to be found. I hope this makes sense. So all of this is to help you not do too much research. So the implication here that I want to leave you with is you probably need to know ahead of time what your plot's going to be, or at least as you go. If you're writing by the seat of your pants are not a plotter, right? You might want to know, okay, in this chapter, we're going to be in a fort. Or if it's fantasy, we're going to build this fort that trolls live in. Cool. Let me do some research just about this so that I know what I'm talking about. And when I describe this stone fort, well, is there a way to build a stone fort in Brazil, which is kind of, this area that's like kind of underwater almost, or below sea level? There may not be. I don't know. And so I need to do this research. I need to figure that out. Now, I don't need to put that in there. If there is a way to build a stone fort, then I can just call it a stone fort. That's fine. But that kind of puts some boundaries around the research that I need to do. And that's how you prevent doing too much research or getting stuck in the research. Does that make sense? If you don't give yourself a boundary like that and you go, well, I'm just going to study all the forts in the world. I'm just going to learn about all the forts, and then whatever fort seems the best, we're going to put in there, but I need a fort. So then you end up spending the next 3 months studying forts. And well, forts are really also kind of castles. So I'm going to add castles to it. So now we're going to go study all the castles in Europe. You don't need to do all that, right? It's so easy to go that route. It's so hard to kind of rein yourself in. Use your outline, use your plan, use your next chapter, whatever you're working on in the immediate future as your boundary around what to research. Okay? Third problem. We often don't know how to parse or find what we've researched. Okay? So what I just explained will help with that, because if you're only researching Portuguese forts that were built in Brazil, that's going to be pretty easy to kind of parse through, because there's not as much research as there could be if you just researched all the forts in the world. So by limiting yourself, by putting boundaries around what you're researching and when, you can very easily make sense of the data, if you will. But there are tools that you can use. There are things that you can apps you can download, or programs on your computer you could use. Paper, pen and paper, that kind of stuff helps. We'll talk about that in a second. But by way of story of Nick's life, early on I knew that I loved research, but I also kind of knew that I probably should have some boundaries around it. So early on, from day one, even before, when I was researching my first novel, I knew that I needed a way to organize this. Originally, everything became, I used to have this, I called it my swipe file. I used to have this green folder. It doesn't matter that it was green, it's just my favorite color. And I would literally get Popular Science magazine, Popular Mechanics, some archaeology stuff. And I would tear out, you remember magazines? They're these things on paper, paper. You remember paper? Everything's digital now. But yeah, I would get these magazines in the mail and I'd rip out an article that was cool. Didn't know if it was going to end up in a book or not, but I would put it in that folder. And then when I needed a new book idea or something in the book where I needed some technology or whatever, I would open it up, spread out all the pages on the floor in my living room, and I would look around and go, oh, I could use that and I could use that. And then I would pick them up, read them, and do the research. And that would kind of spark my research for that thing. That got unwieldy pretty quickly because I am interested in so many different things and I have all these different eclectic tastes, and everything became fun and interesting and something to research. And so I abandoned that swipe file and paper and put it in digital form. It lived in an Evernote folder for a long, long time, for many, many years. I hate Evernote, or began to hate Evernote, so I switched over to Apple Notes, which is where that swipe file still lives, but I don't use it the same way anymore because I didn't have enough boundaries around, what I was researching. And I already explained all that. So that's why I don't use that version of it. But ultimately, what I discovered was the tool that I needed to be visual, right? I'm a visual guy. So not text-based, not, browser tabs that are open. It needed to be much more visual, kind of And what I mean by that, when I started to define it for myself, is it needed to be something that was all at a glance. Let's say a giant monitor, but something I could scroll around in, and all of it was in one place. It was on one page. So that was the problem with Evernote and the problem with Apple Notes or any note-taking thing, OneNote, whatever. Those are really good for taking notes. But when I'm putting my characters in one folder and I'm putting my research notes or settings, I should say, in another folder, and then history notes in another folder and technology in another folder, they're in different folders. I can't see them all at the same time. And so when I'm working on a book, I kind of want this like mood board approach where you've got everything up and it's all visual and this big, imagine the meme where the guy's like got little thumbtacks and there's like red yarn on everything. I want that for the research. I want that for every book. And so I've been hunting tools, basically. I've been tool hunting since 10 years ago, trying to find the perfect tool. Now, there is no perfect tool. I'm still hunting. But the point is, that's what I needed. I only realized that after I spent a lot of time figuring out why I felt like my research, I was either doing too much of it or too little of it. So the point of this section, by long-winded way of telling that whole story, was to tell you, you're different than I am, and you're different than every other author. So I'm going to tell you some of these tools. Go check them out, but don't feel like those are the tools you have to use. There's going to be something about my story that you resonate with and something you go, ooh, yeah, gross. I don't want to do it that way. And that's perfectly fine. That's what you're supposed to do. So go figure out for yourself how you like to take notes, but also, and this is probably more important, how you like to collate those notes or organize those notes, because that was the key for me. I can take notes all day. I can go drag, links and Wikipedia articles and copy paste all that stuff into folders. But that doesn't mean it's organized. And that, because it's not organized necessarily the way I want it, means that I'm not going to be able to access it when I need it, which is when I'm, heads down, neck deep in a book. So that's the point. Go figure out the tool that you need by figuring out what type of boundaries you want around your research, what type of a way you want to see it. So for me, going back to that idea of wanting everything kind of all on one page, I learned about mind mapping tools. And I thought, well, this might work. So there's tools like, I think it's OmniPlan. Omni has a bunch of programs. One of them is a mind mapping tool. MindNode Pro. I'm on a Mac. I don't know if it's Windows or if it's Mac only, but I use MindNode Pro, but I don't use it for the research anymore because I realized, hey, this is a cool tool, but this isn't what I want. I tried it and it was cool, but not for research. So I use it for planning. It's, my nodes are like, you got a bubble that says like you, and then like over here, that's like all the areas of responsibility you have. And then each one of those has a bunch of little branches out. And it's kind of fun for, task planning and like organizing your tasks in your to-do list because it's more visual, right? But for research, it didn't work as well because I couldn't drop in, like if there's a YouTube video I saw on Portuguese fort building, I don't know. I wanted to be able to drop that in there and stick that into this tool, and you couldn't do it. And so I would go back to Notes or Evernote or OneNote. You can drag videos in there, but again, they end up in a folder somewhere. So the point is, there's one that I found actually very, very recently. I've only now started using it, and it's wonderful, but it's called Millinote. Is it Millinote? I don't even know. I think it's Millinote. Mill. Millinote? Sorry, I should have had this written down. Yeah, it is. Millinote? Oh, it's one L. Milanote. Milanote. I don't know. Whatever. But it's exactly what I'm talking about, what I want, what I needed, which is it's just kind of a mood board. It's all digital, right? It's been a mood board, and you can draw on it. So if you're on an iPad, you can use like an Apple Pencil. You can drag images and videos, and they live right next to each other, and you click play, and it starts playing. It's super, super slick. And of course, I can have regular notes where I just type stuff, and all of it lives right there. So any images, any video, any content can all just live right there. I can have a picture of Peruvian forts next to a video about how they're built. I can draw arrows from one to the other. If I want to make a literal character arc, I can draw that out. My tour guide needs to meet a horrifying demise. So how do I kill her? Well, I can put that in there. All of it can be on the same page. And this was super powerful for me when I found it. Like I said, I've only now just found it. So I can't tell you that it's the ultimate solution for me, but I think it might be. But the point is, that's the one for me. You need to find the one for you. If you're resonating with every single thing I'm saying, maybe that's the one. Maybe try that one out because you want to see all your research in one place. It's got the boundaries around the research, meaning I can still have one board for that Peruvian fort, and that's one setting. And so all of the stuff can just be on there. And then when I write those scenes that are set in that fort, it's now realistic. I'm writing the 10% while I know the 90%. All of that stuff can still be true. But I needed a tool that can do that, that can be more visual. I believe whiteboards, pencil and paper, moleskin journals, these are great because you can kind of do the same thing. You can draw arrows and take some notes. Of course, it takes a little longer, of course, and you're not going to copy the content on a web page. You're going to try to just write a link, but then the links can get longer. So there's some downsides to doing that by hand. Of course, I used to have a whiteboard in the church where I lived in a church, which is kind of a fun story. That was the size of a wall, and I would cover the entire whiteboard with my notes, with what I just described, all these visuals and arrows and all these, and it was great. And I felt like a serial killer, because I'm like, but I had this whiteboard filled up. The problem was when I would want to go to the beach, I lived in Hawaii, so I was like, I'm gonna go right on the beach. I couldn't take it with me, right? I would have to snap a picture and then take that with me, and then I'm looking at my phone, and it didn't work. So whiteboards can work, paper, pen, legal pad next to the desk, whatever, all that can work. But I find digital is still best because a lot of the research I'm doing starts digitally. And so it might as well just stay digitally. It's easy enough to bring analog stuff into the digital realm. We can snap a picture of it. We can copy the text, all that. Then it's searchable, taggable, all that. Anyway, the point is you got to figure out what that type of tool is for you so that you can do these things and not end up making your books thin with not enough research, but also not too much research, because those are the two big ones. And if you have too much research, again, the third problem is that, the organization stuff. So you need a tool that can also organize and kind of parse this data. Thank you. Yes, Sneha posted the link in there. That's the one I'm talking about, Milanote. Like I said, I just started using it a few days ago. Like, it's brand new, but I think that's the one. I think I'm in love. I think I'm going to marry it. On that note, though, why don't you guys post something, if you've got a tool that you use that you love? Like I mentioned this before, drop it in there. If you have a question, we're done, by the way. So if you have a question, anything that I didn't cover, you want me to kind of clarify, I know it was kind of an info dump. The whole thing was poor research. As an example of that, I was giving you way too much stuff without really explaining it well. I hope that you understood where I was going with some of this. But yeah, if you've got a question or a tool that you use that is helpful, I did write down a bunch, that I mentioned some of them, but there's other tools like Trello, which is a Kanban board style, which is, you've got, from your perspective, you've got all these like columns of tasks, and you can put cards in each column and then slide them over as they get more and more completed. But again, that's more for project management, I think, in my opinion. It could work for fiction writing and crafting, but not the best tool out there for that. Scrivener is worth mentioning. It has what they call the binder, which is on the left side of the screen, so over here from your perspective. Everything in there is called the binder. So your draft, all the chapters and scenes and all that are in there. That's part of the binder. And so is this section called research. And the default project opens with the research tab. You click it and you can see what's in there. And you can drag videos and images and stuff, links. But again, the problem becomes it's not all kind of visibly in one place. It's all in a folder again. But you have to click through each one and see what it is. And then it's searchable, but it's not, it's not the same. I did use it for a while because I write in Scrivener. And it was kind of nice to have all my research in the same place as the place I was writing. But as far as research goes, it wasn't inspiring me in the right ways. I wasn't really referring back to it enough. Whereas Milanote, I'm already noticing, okay, yeah, I'm liking this. This is cool. I'm going to look at this, maybe even print out a picture of it, stick it on the wall. I don't know. Joan, good comment. Yeah, for visual research, like inside of a Victorian mansion, for example, I use a private board on Pinterest. Yeah, Pinterest is great. That's built to be a digital mood board, right? Pinterest started as this visual thing. It still is a very visual thing. Google Keep, I'm not familiar with. It's Google. I get it. If you're in the Android side of things, I get it. Don't worry, I get it. But I'm not a Google fan. I find a lot of their tools, they look like they were made by engineers. Let's just call it that. I'm a sucker for good looking UX UI design. That's why I like Milanote, I think. But I'm a Mac guy at heart, so anything Google or whatnot. Okay, so it's like Evernote but free. Yeah, Evernote, same thing. I didn't like Evernote solely because of the way it looked, and people love Evernote because of the way it looks. So that's just an opinion. But Evernote is good. It does work really well. Apple Notes is far simpler, and it's obviously integrated to the ecosystem I already use. So for generally, I have my notes open right now. I'm literally looking at the notes I made on how to research in Apple Notes. And I've got 799 notes right now. So that there's all kinds of stuff in there. I use that for note taking still. Yeah, Evernote, OneNote, Apple Notes, OpenOffice has one, and Google Keep, like you said, it's like Evernote. Yeah, Sneha says, I've heard good things about Campfire. I think if it's the company, it's Basecamp, right? I think is the company behind that. They're good people. They're good dudes. David Heinemeier Hansen, I think. I don't know, maybe. I like that company, and so I bet that's probably a pretty good one. But I've never used it. This may not be what I'm thinking of, actually. This may be something different. I'm going to open it and look at it right now because it looks cool. It's billed as research tool for, or organizing note-taking tool for writers, for fiction writers. Oh, yeah. Okay. I know this one. Yep. Yeah, this is, didn't the guys behind Sterling and Stone start this one or buy this one? Let me see, click the About Us page. I just had lunch and wine with one of the, he's not with Sterling and Stone anymore, but Johnny B. Truant, not his real name. Anyway, sorry. I am tangentializing. That's a good one. I got that one open. I'll check that one out after. Thank you for that. Cool. Yeah. Any last minute questions? Any notes? Anything you want to add? Just feel free to drop it in there. I'm still here for another few minutes. But I hope this helps. I hope this was something that you can use either to, a lot of it maybe is a reminder. Maybe you already know this, but maybe there's some new information here and you can start thinking in terms of how do I do research better? How do I actually organize this stuff well? Cool. Lynn's got one. Yeah, she says, I build a Word doc with notes, articles, pictures, links to videos, etc., and use headings, organizing info by topic. There you go. Yeah, helps me keep all my research for a single series all in one place. I feel like that would get unwieldy, right? Wouldn't that file start to get pretty large if you're dropping a bunch of pictures and articles and things in there? And again, I don't want to poop on your, if it works for you, it works for you. And that's the key. I gave up on Word long ago just because it was so bloated with, trying to export, for example, into HTML. It was just like all this extraneous code that wasn't necessary. Now that's a nerd version of why not to use Word. But it obviously is very well used and it's very well maintained. So it's a good app that, it's a lot of millions of people use every day. So nothing wrong with that. I just feel like it would be bloated, but no, you've got it organized. So that's the point. You've got headings. You can do the same thing like with Google Docs, build some headings, organize your stuff. So you can just one click takes you to where you need to be. But yeah, again, if you're writing in Microsoft Word, then it might make sense to have your research also in Word for sure. Sneha's used Google spreadsheets with tabs to organize world Bibles. I've seen this before. It's pretty heavy, gets pretty dense. It's cool because I love me a good spreadsheet, but it does get to be, I'm wishing there's just a little bit more on the design side. And the reason there's not is it's a spreadsheet. It's meant to be a spreadsheet. It's meant to kind of get out of the way. But yeah, I could see that being a good tool as well. These online tools like Google Docs, Google Sheets, they are awesome because they're online. They're accessible as long as you have an internet connection. For the same reason, offline tools like Scrivener are great because you can access them offline. You don't have to have an internet connection. So think about that too. The one I mentioned before, the Milanote, is online, and so you have to have access to it. But they have apps. I'm pretty sure they sync with the cloud. So if I end up going to that beach and writing and want to pull up my research, as long as I've sanctified them, then it should show up and I should have it as long as I have power on my computer. Okay. Great. Yeah. So this is good stuff. Thanks everyone for chiming in. Thanks for pitching in. Thanks for being here. I hope this is helpful. I will post this video next week. If you guys are coming back after the fact to want to watch and reference it, should be there. Go check out BookCareerInAYear.com or learn.BookCareerInAYear.com. I probably should change that. One of those websites has the video link, and you click on the video library. I think you have to be logged in, but go make an account, a free account if you don't have one, and log in, and you can see all these videos, all these live streams in reverse chronological order. I don't know what one point was with that, but yeah, you can go see all these live streams, and I'm trying to get them kind of organized and parsed into different versions of the same content to try to get it out there to as many people as possible. I do think it's helpful. This body of knowledge that you and I are creating hopefully can help some other author down the road. And that's the whole point of doing these live streams totally free. Yeah, I get to pitch stuff that I do, like the Author Send program, which I still think is really worth it if you're not in there. But the whole point of these live streams is because I want to share knowledge. It helps me clarify things about my own writing life and career. And I'm at, if somebody gets one tidbit from one of them, then I feel like I've done my job. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to me ramble on about research. And I hope you have a good weekend. We will see you all next week.